All right, I will say good morning, and sorry. Perfect. Okay. Tremendous. Okay. Let's say good morning. Welcome to Baruch Hashem. Bava Metzia, first of all, begin with a tremendous mazel tov to all the assignment for Baba Kama. What an awesome and incredible and beautiful and holy accomplishment. Truly an overwhelming zuchos, Baruch Hashem, for all of us to be able to learn together, to be able to to be able to finish together. A tremendous yeshachach again to all of those who were able to come to the siyum, to the people who planned the siyum, worked on the siyum, attended the siyum. It's truly beautiful. But even those who weren't able to attend or be part of the siyum, Baruch Hashem, the ikar, really isn't a celebration. The ikar is the avoda, and Baruch Hashem, we're all zocha to do this avoda together, and it is an incredible zuchos to be able to continue this avoda this morning. What a way to end the week. What a way to go into Shabbos Kodesh. I will say, like, a lot of interesting things today, right? It's the beginning of a new secular month, which is meaningful in and of itself. New beginnings, new aschalas. It's the end of something, the end of a week. But of course, Friday, Erev Shabbos, although it's the end of the week, but it's also the beginning of Shabbos Kodesh. So we have the beginning of a new month. We have the beginning, Metzia Hashem, of Shabbos Kodesh, the haschala of a new Masechta. All of these incredible beginnings kind of converging and coalescing in one place. An incredible zuchos. I also want to thank Shmuel Artman brought the a thing of a receptacle of pens. The notebooks are just a little bit delayed. So Metzia Hashem will have the notebooks b'shah tov mitzlachos by Monday. But again, as we begin this Masechta, as I said at the end of Baba Kama, it's really kidai to keep a notebook. So for the next couple of days, it might just have to be a piece of paper or the margins of your Gemara. I will say, but again, kind of once we know what happens, we come to a new Masechta, and a lot of times, we say to ourselves, okay, this is my Masechta, right? This is the time that I'm not going to just be one of those like daf Yomi Masechtas where like I show up, I get something, I go home, I'm pretty sure I remember that I learned. I know I was here, right? Because I drank coffee. So that's the raya, that I was definitely present. I saw my chaverim, I know I was present, but the truth is, I don't necessarily know what I learned that day. The power of just having a notebook, the power of taking notes, is even if it's one piece, two pieces, a halacha, a hashkafa, a machlokes, a concept, you have something. So I apologize, I meant to have the notebooks ready for today, but even though they're not ready, but just make sure that every single day you're recording something. Or if you have an excellent memory, that's great, then record it in your memory banks. But Lamaisa, take something with you each and every day. I will say. So with that, let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar Aleph, Mrs. Selma Wolf, for dedicating all the Sherman Trushos this month with immense gratitude for the refuahs from Hashem, in the merit of a refuah shlema for all of those in need, in the schus of our brave soldiers, and in merit Hashem in the schus of the return of our hostages. The Schwartzbaum family, in memory of Rabbi Aaron Schwartzbaum, Aaron Yosef ben Meir Zichron Livracha, and the Ziv, Levine, and Berman families, in memory of Bill Ziv, Zev Shmuel ben Yisrael Zichron Livracha. The Week of Learning sponsors, Steve Galaskov, who's joining us on Zoom, in honor of the bris of his grandson, Nachum David ben Elio Baruch Halevi. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, the families in nechama. This little boy in Metzia Hashem, she grew up to be an incredible mentor, an exceptional mentor, a source of nachas and halavai. Our soldiers should be successful, b'chol ma'aseh yadeim, and Chadash Baruch Hu should bring back every last one of the hostages in Metzia Hashem b'sha'a tova u'mitzlachos. We will say with that, let us begin. First of all, I can't believe no one sponsored the first daf of Bava Metzia. Okay, shkoyach. Anyone else? Good. Chavra, come on, chaparayin over here. First daf of Maseches Bava Metzia, sponsored by Menachem and Susie Schoenfeld, in the schus of continued Talmud Torah, Hatzlacha, Bracha, Simcha, and Shafa for their family, Ad 120 Sharim Tovos. Now, who wouldn't have sponsored? Okay, but whatever, you snooze, you lose. I will say, so let's go weiter. A lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. Let us begin. Shnayim ochzin betalis. That was incredible. Welcome to Maseches Bava Metzia. For many of us, this brings back incredible memories of our childhood, of learning yeshiva. For many of us, this brings back traumatic memories of our childhood. But it's a trigger regardless. So with that, but here's the good news. Whatever your memories of Shaykhs, for many of us, this was the first Gemara that we ever learned. First Gemara we ever learned. But again, in Metzia Hashem, now we learn in our adult lives, and it takes on a totally different meaning. So we begin with a very simple case. Two people are holding on to a cloak. So even before we go on, we can't even get our whole foot into the waters of Bava Metzia without already seeing something incredibly amazing. So there are two people, we'll call them Reuven and Shimon, are both holding on to a cloak, a talis. And what happens? Ze omer ani mitzasiya, ze omer ani mitzasiya. Reuven says, I found it. Shimon says, I found it. Reuven says, Ze omer kula shali, and Ze omer kula shali. Reuven says it all belongs to me, and Shimon says it all belongs to me. So Rashi points out over here, and I got Zevi's little that we don't do Rashi. I picked up on that. So whatever. Right? So let's take a look. Take a look at Rashi. Zevi, the first Rashi on the Dav. Shnaim ochzin betalis. Rashi says Davka ochzin, t'shtehen muchzakin ba, ve'in lazeh koach ba yoser mizeh. So we'll say, so remember again, we're talking about a case, Bepashtos, we're going to see, although the Gemara is going to try to understand what exactly the case is over here that we're referencing, but Bepashtos, we're talking about a case of two people who find an object, right? They find the cloak lying on the ground, and therefore, again, each of them are holding on to it. Now, I will say, so just the imagery over here is very important. Literally, Reuven and Shimon are both holding on to this cloak. Now, because they're both holding it, remember the concept like that possession is 9/10 of the law. So remember, again, we subscribe to that same concept as well. That's why we have the concept of what? Of hamotzi mechavera alav haraya, right? That again, whoever has the item is considered to be the muchzak, is considered to be the person who is in possession. And if you want to extract that item from someone who is holding it, that burden of proof is upon you, the extractor. So therefore, again, Rashi points out over here, it's Tafka Ochsin. Ochsin, we'll say, is not like a metaphor, right? Ochsin is not like, Ochsin literally means that Reuven and Shimon are both holding on to this cloak. So go on, let's finish in Rashi. Therefore, again, neither one of the parties, neither Reuven nor Shimon, has any greater claim to this cloak. Litol b'shvua. So we'll say, so remember again, obviously if Reuven was holding it and saying it's mine, and Shimon says, no, it's mine, but Shimon's not holding it, we'll say obviously Reuven has the upper hand. What the Mishnah is trying to create over here is dafka a situation of complete, what we'll call complete legal equality. Both Reuven and Shimon have the same exact claim to this object. Rashi says over here, okay, fine. So I'll say, so that's the case. This is the opening case of Bava Metzia. Shnai mochs metalis, Reuven and Shimon both holding onto a cloak. Ze omer ani mitzasiya v'kula shali. I'm just bringing everything together, though we'll break it up. Reuven says, I found it, it's all mine. Shimon says, I found it, and it's all mine. So I'll tell you something truly beautiful. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh brings down, again, Sashkafa, right literally in the opening line of this Masechta. He'll say, the Baal Shem Tov says that you see from here, in life, whenever you want something, there is always an opposing force. That's the way that it works. It's always an opposing force. You find something in life that you want. You find, so to speak, your metaphorical talis. That thing that you want to make your own in life, right? Ani mitzasiha. I found it. V'kula shali. And it's mine. So Rabbi will say, what's always going to happen in life when that occurs? V'zeh omer ani mitzasiha v'kula shali. Anything that you want in life, anything you want to acquire, you have to be prepared to fight for it. You see so many things in life we want, and we assume that just because we want it, they're just going to fall into place. But the truth is, the greater the talis, the holier the talis, the more special the talis, the greater the opposing force for it. And in life, if you want something, you have to be ready to fight. You have to be ready to put in the effort. You have to be ready to say, Ani mitzasiya v'kula shali, I'm going to make it mine. If you want it, if you want to assert ownership over it, if you want it to be yours, you have to be ready to fight. You have to be ready to be Moser Nefesh. And incredibly, amazingly, this concept, look at the confluence of events. This Yesod is found in the opening pasuk of this week's parsha as well. There's an incredible idea by the great tzaddik Rabbi Aaron of Karlin. So the pasuk says, "Kisisa es rosh b'nei Yisrael of kudehem v'nasnu ish kofer nafsho." So the pasuk says, opening parshas Kisisa. I'm supposed to get a little parsha vart also all at the same time, opening above Metzia. Pasuk says when you want to go ahead and you want to literally count the head of Klal Yisrael of kudehem for their numbers, each person v'nasnu ish kofer nafsho. Each person will give an atonement for their soul. Now, of course, the reference over here is to what? Is to machzis hashekel, to the half shekel. Why is half shekel called kofer nafsho? Why is it called an atonement for your soul? So Rashi HaKadosh already points this out because one of the things that the machzis shekel was used for was karbanos tzibor, communal offerings, and communal offerings affect a sense of atonement. But listen to what the tzaddik Rabbi Aaron Karlin says. This is incredible. He says, "Im ata rotze liskof es hakoma hashlema, letakin es hachatoim, lo seis rosh." He will say if a person, literal translation, a person wants to stand at their full posture, a person wants to fix all of his sins, a person wants to, in our terms we'll call it, fully self-actualize. So what do you do? What do you do? He says, Haderech hayich, and he says, Kisisa es rosh b'nei. So if you want to lift up the head, if a person wants to self-actualize in life, we will say, no, isn't that why we come here deep down? Isn't it why we come here every single morning? Because I want to figure out how to become the best version of me. It's not really to learn Gemara. You can learn Gemara anywhere or anytime. Why do we come here in the morning? We come in the morning because we want to figure out how do I become the best version of me. So kisisas rosh b'nei Yisrael. How do I lift my head? How do I self-actualize? How to become the best version of me? So this is what the Rabbi says is incredible. V'nasnu ish kofer nafsho la'Hashem. What does that mean? V'nasnu ish kofer nafsho la'Hashem. Mesiras nefesh lemitzvos or lemaisim tovim. Let's see, mesiras nefesh. You have to be willing to push yourself. You have to be willing to give stuff up. You have to be willing to engage in self-sacrifice. That's v'nasnu ish kofer nafsho. Or in other words, otherwise stated, ani mitzasiha v'kula sheli. It's mine. It's mine. If my neshama is mine, if the talus is mine, then I'm going to work for it, then I'm going to labor for it, then I'm going to sacrifice for it. But someone else. Well, so, when it comes to your neshama, it's a constant tug of war. The Ribono Shel Olam says, Ani mitzasiya v'kula sheli, and the Satan, the Yitzhahara, the Malach HaMavet says, Ani mitzasiya v'kula sheli. There's a constant tug of war. So who's going to win? Who's going to win? Who's going to grab hold of the talus? And we'll say it all depends on how much effort you're willing to put in. V'nasnu ish kofer nafsho. You want the kisisas rosh b'nei Yisrael. You want to self-actualize. V'nasnu ish kofer nafsho. The more you're willing to sacrifice, the more you're willing to do, the more effort you're willing to put in, that will determine ultimately who wins your personalistic tug of war. We'll say, all right, good Shabbos. And it's good. Feels like we could end over there. Feels like, all right, okay, we'll say, let's go. So what do we do? What's the halacha in this case? Incredible opening. We'll say, incredible opening to Bava Metzia. Okay, so what's the halacha? So we'll say, what do you do? Now we'll say, again, what's unique about this case, what's tremendously unique about this case, is there's no indicator who is right. Right? Because remember, at the end of the day, both of them are making equal claims. Right? Neither Reuven nor Shimon has a greater claim. So what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Zeh yishava she'in lo ba pachos mechatzia, v'zeh yishava she'in lo ba pachos mechatzia, v'yachloku. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Reuven swears that he owns no less than 50%. Shimon swears that he owns no less than 50%. And they split the cloak. They split the cloak. Shabbos says, so this is really interesting. So what's the pshat over here? Shabbos says, so first of all, I have to understand what's the shvua. What's the shvua? But anyway, Shabbos, you'll think to yourself, 1 second. Shouldn't Reuven swear that he owns the whole thing? And Shimon swear that he owns the whole thing? So the Mishnah is explaining to us, you can't structure a shvua like that. Why not? Why not? Because we'll say, if both of them take a shvua like that, one thing is clear, which is, someone's lying. And in halacha, we can't institutionalize a shvua, a mutual shvua, where one of the parties we know for sure is lying, because that means we're setting up a shvua sheker, a false oath. So therefore, again, I will say what we do is, because we're going to see, there is a possibility that really each of them own 50%. We'll talk about how that could be. There is a possibility. So therefore, again, Reuven, you swear you own no less than 50%. Shimon, you swear you own no less than 50%. Both of those claims could be true. Both of those shvuos could be true, and therefore once each of them take a shvua, yachloku, we split the cloak. Incredible. All right, I'll say that's case number one. Next, ze omer kula shali v'ze omer chatzia shali. Well, I'll say another. So this is an interesting case. Case two, Reuven says the whole cloak belongs to me. Shimon says half of the cloak belongs to me. Okay, interesting case. So we'll say what's the halacha? Haomer kula shali yishava she'en lo ba'pachos mishalosh chalakim. So we'll say. So now here's what's interesting. In this case over here, remember, they both agree on one thing. What do they both agree on? That Reuven owns 50%. Meaning why? Reuven's claiming I own the whole cloak. Shimon's claiming I only own half of the cloak. So that tells you again that halacha l'maisa, Shimon is being modeh, Shimon is admitting to 50% of Reuven's ownership. So therefore, we'll say if you think about it, therefore really only 50% of this cloak is contested. So we'll say, so now what do? We remember again, the halacha always works like this. The model over here that the Mishnah is espousing is, you take the contested amount, everyone swears that they own half of the contested amount, and we move forward. So watch this. So Zermer Kula Shali, V'Zermer Chesya Shali. Reuven says the whole cloak belongs to me. And Shimon says half of the cloak belongs to me. So what's that? So before we go on, take a look at Rashi. Zermer Chesya Shali, Modehu Shachetzi Shachavero. So Shimon is admitting that 50% of the cloak belongs to Reuven. Ve'ein danin ela al Chetzia. And therefore we'll say we're only adjudicating. Remember again, Beis only gets involved in the contested amount. So the contested amount over here is the remaining 50%. So what's that? I'll come back to the Mishnah. We'll finish up Rashi. So the Gemara says, Yishava she'en lo ba'pachos mishlosh chalakim, v'ha'omer chatzia shali yishava she'en lo ba'pachos mirevia. So ultimately, again, Reuven will claim that he owns no less than 3/4 of this. Shimon will claim that he owns no less than 1/4 of this. And I will say they both swear to that. Zen notel shlosh chalakim, v'zen notel revia. Reuven will take 3/4, and Shimon will take 1/4, which I will say essentially means is they're both swearing about that contested half, and they're each taking half of that contested half. So therefore, again, Reuven will walk away with 3/4, Shimon will walk away with 1/4. Go back to that Rashi, Zeh Omer Chatzia. Therefore, the Gemara says, Yishava ki mishpat harishon mashen donin alav nishban, shteim she'in l'chol echad pachos michatzyav, v'notel kol echad chatzyav. So we'll say, again, this second case is the same thing as the first case, just different proportions. Good. Next. We'll say case number three. Two people are riding on an animal together. So Reuven and Shimon are both riding on a horse. So what happens? Or Reuven's riding on the animal and Shimon is leading it. And same case. Ze omer kula shali, v'ze omer kula shali. So we'll say, so this case seems to be the same thing as the first case. Reuven claims the whole animal is mine. Shimon claims the whole animal is mine. I both say, now again, why do I need a case number 3 that's the same thing as case number 1? So Rashi is mechav into this, and Rashi says, Hayishnayim rochvin, la'ashmo'inon asa, dirachov umanig shnehem shavin liknos peimim and a hefker. So we'll say, what this halacha is introducing to, what this case is introducing to us is not a new halacha vis-a-vis splitting contested materials or items. What it's introducing to us, we'll say, is a new interesting fact about how you can acquire an animal from hefker. So if you come across a hefker animal, there are 2 ways to acquire it. Number 1, ride it, right? Number 2, lead it. So therefore, again, in this case over here, where Reuven is sitting on the animal, right, and Shimon is leading on the animal, you might have thought, one second, obviously Reuven has a stronger claim. He's riding the animal. No, both riding it and leading it ultimately, again, have the same halachic entitlement. So Zamar Kula Shali, V'Zamar Kula Shali. So we'll say, so what's the halacha? Both Reuven and Shimon are claiming that both of them are entitled to the entire animal. So the Gemara says, Zeh yeshava she'in lo ba'pachos mechatzia, v'zeh yeshava she'in lo ba'pachos mechatzia, v'yachloku. So halacha l'maisa, both Reuven and Shimon swear. That they own no less than 50%. And what's the halacha? They split the animal. Bizman shein modim. So Rabbi says, halacha l'maisa. When both Reuven and Shimon agree, Rashi says over here, Bezman shein modin, b'gimara mefarish te b'haya shmoina damakbia metzila chavero kana chavero. So we'll say, so this is actually interesting. So we're going to see that what this means is as follows. When Reuven and Shimon both agree that, let's say, they both lifted the found object at the same time. So we'll say, so in this case over here, remember, what's happening, but we're going to see what's happening beforehand is the easiest way to understand this Mishnah is that we're talking about an object that was lost, or a hefker object, and what's happening over here is Reuven's claiming, I found it first. Shimon's saying, I found it first. The Mishnah ends off with a case of what happens if Reuven and Shimon say, we both stumbled upon this hefker object at the same time, and we mamish lifted it up with complete simultaneity. We lift it up at the same time, then o shishlam edim, or there's edus that they acquired it at the same time. What's the halacha? Cholkin below shvua. Then we'll say, obviously, in that case, they split it, and no need for a shvua. Remember again, the shvua, the mechanism of a shvua is only necessary when? Only necessary when we have a machlokes about who's the owner of it. But if again, either they both agree, or halacha l'maaseh there's edus, that they both literally acquired it at the same time, then yachloka below shvua. So we'll say, so essentially, 4 cases in the Mishnah. Case number one, they find an object from hefker. Both Reuven and Shimon are claiming we both own the whole thing. In other words, that didn't come out right. Reuven saying I own the whole thing. Shimon saying I own the whole thing. Ani mitzaseh v'kula shali. Ani mitzaseh v'kula shali. What's the halacha? Shvua. That's what? Neither of us own less than 50%. And yachloku. Case number 2, Reuven says, I own the whole thing. Shimon says, I own half of it. Again, Abba says, so what's the machlokes amount? Machlokes is on 50%. Remember, again, we always split the contested amount. So Reuven claims, I own no less than 3/4. Shimon says, I own no less than 1/4. And again, they take the shvua and they split it up in those proportions. Case number 3, which is the same thing as case number 1, just with an animal. And the chiddush over there is you could acquire an animal from hefker either by riding it or by leading it. Same halacha, take a shvua, split it 50-50. And case number 4 is a case of modim. What happens if there's no machlokes, right? Everyone is agreeing, right? Reuven, we picked it up at the same time, or there's edus, yachloku, and no shvua. Incredible. Abosai, Mazel Tov on completing our first Mishnah, Maseches Bava Metzia. Incredible. Let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. Lama li lemisna ze omer ani mitzasiya v'ze omer ani mitzasiya ze omer kula shali v'ze omer kula shali listichada. So I'll say the first thing the Gemara begins with is what appears to be a redundancy, right? In other words, we'll say how does the Mishnah read? So right, the Mishnah reads 2 people are holding on to a talis, shnayim ochsim a talis. Ze omer ani mitzasiya v'ze omer ani mitzasiya ze omer kula shali v'ze omer kula shali. So we'll say, so in reality, we're going to see there's actually 2 questions. Number 1 is, why do you need both phrases, right? Ani mitzasiha and kula shali. Just, we'll say, we understand what the claim is over here, right? When Reuven comes along and Reuven says, I found it. We'll say, what does I found it mean? I found it and it's mine. It's understood. So the first question the Gemara is asking over here is, why are both phrases necessary? We'll say, we're going to see, just coming attractions, we're going to see that even if you could demonstrate why both phrases are necessary, why are they broken up? Right? In other words, the Mishnah should read, Ze omer ani mitzasiha v'kula shali, v'ze omer ani mitzasiha v'kula shali. But instead it doesn't say, it says, Ze omer ani mitzasiha, v'ze omer ani mitzasiha. Ze omer kula shali, v'ze omer kula shali. But again, we're not up to that second question yet. The first question is, why the need for both phrases? So Gemara says, let's nichada. Just say one of them. And I will say, whichever one you want to say, that's fine, but why the need for both? So I will say, this is incredible. To which the Gemara says, first of all, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. The first question is ultimately, why do we go ahead and break up the phrases, right? Why Omer, Ze Omer ani mitzasiya? Reuven said, I found it. Shimon said, I found it. Reuven said, it's all mine. Shimon said, it's all mine. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Chada katani. In reality, it's one comprehensive claim. Ze Omer ani mitzasiya v'kula shali, v'ze Omer ani mitzasiya v'kula shali. You're right. Just for whatever reason, stylistically, the Mishnah went ahead and broke this up. But at the end of the day, it is one comprehensive claim. Reuven's claiming, I found it and it's all mine. Shimon's claiming, I found it and it's all mine. So even though the Mishnah breaks up the phrases, in reality, it's one phrase. Okay, the Gemara says, I don't understand. V'lisni ani mitzasiya v'ani yedana dekula shali. So again, we'll say, so now, I flipped the questions, I apologize. So now the Gemara says, I don't understand. You don't need both phrases. Just say ani mitzasiya. Let the Mishnah say, Reuven came along and he said, I found the cloak. And I understand that when he says, I found it, what he's claiming is, it's mine. So I'll say, this is actually fascinating. Itan ani mitzasiya. The Gemara says, had we written, I found it, hava mina my mitzasiya. What does it mean, I found it? Re'isiha, afagav delo asi liadei, beri'ia ba'al makani. So I'll say, this is fascinating. You might have thought that the phrase, I found it, what does I found it mean? I found it means I saw it first. I saw it first. And maybe Ruvain's claiming that by seeing it first, somehow that makes him the owner. As if Re'iyah, as if seeing it, has some type of acquisitory power. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, Rashi says, no, not yet. Rashi says, Kodim Shigbata Osa. So Ruvain's claims, I will say again, this is interesting. The Hadamina is, had the Mishnah just said that, right, Ruvain said, Ani Mitzasiya, I found it means I saw it before you, and somehow seeing it gives me the power of acquisition. So therefore the Gemara says, Tana Kula Shali de Beri'iyah Lokani. So therefore I will say, here's what's interesting. So apparently, Ani Mitzasiya, I found it by itself. In other words, the phrase I found it would have erroneously led you to think that seeing it first gives you possession of it. Therefore, the Mishnah adds in the additional phrase, Vikula Shali, and it's all mine. All mine means what? I'm acquiring this object. I'm acquiring it. Okay, therefore it teaches us the Beri'iyah Lokani. Seeing something of outside does not allow you to acquire it. The Gemara says, Omi matzis amrit, my mitzasiya ri'isiha. So is that really? Right? In other words, you would have thought, is that a true Havamina? That you would have thought that the phrase Ani mitzasiya, I found it, means that I saw it first? The Gemara says, Rabbi says, Umitzasa da'asoy liyadei mashma. Shabbos, so the pasuk, the Gemara is quoting the pasuk about v'chein saseh lechamoro v'chein saseh l'simosa v'chein saseh l'chol avedas achicha asher tovad mimenu umitzasa lo suchali salim. So we'll say the pasuk over here is actually talking about hashavas aveda. If you find a lost object that belongs to your friend, the halacha is you can't turn away from it, pretend like you don't see it. You have to return it to him. You have to return it to him. So we'll say, so the pasuk by Hashavas Aveda says, umitzasa, you find it. What does mitzasa mean? The asiriyadei mashma. So we'll say, in the pasuk of Hashavas Aveda, Pashtus, we understand, what are we talking about over here? We're talking about that a person actually finds something and takes something into their physical possession. The Torah is saying, yeah, the mitzvah to return it to the owner. What do you see from here? You see from here the lashon of umitzasa, finding something means what? Taking it into your possession. Therefore, coming full circle, even had the Mishnah just said, Ani mitzasiha, right? I found it. The Gemara is saying, no, you can't just say that phrase, because that phrase would have meant, I saw it first. No, it doesn't. Mitzasiya means that you might have seen it first, but mitzasiya means you took it into your physical possession. To which the Gemara says, you're right. In umitzasa dikra, the mitzasadikra, the asliya mashi. You're right. In the pasuk, mitzasa means that ultimately it came into your physical possession. Umiu tana lishna da almanakit. So we'll say, but again, we see this often that there's a difference in the way that words are used in the Torah and how they're used ultimately in Chazal, in the Mishnah, and therefore again within the Mishnah, ultimately, mitzasa could have had a lashon of just re'iyah. So the Gemara says, and therefore again, because Chazal wanted to avoid that erroneous conclusion that seeing it gives you possession of it, they added in the phrase of v'kula shali, the whole thing belongs to me. So the Gemara says, amar ana ishkachas, v'afagav d'lo asili yadei b're'iyah ba'al makani. And again, I will say, so because of the way people use lashon, so essentially Gemara is answering like this. On a da'araisa level, you're right. The word mitzasa absolutely means to take physical possession. But that's not the way colloquially that word is used. Very often a person says, I found it. What do they mean when they say I found it? What do they mean when they say I found it? Right? I saw it. And therefore, again, in the context of the Mishnah, had you had Shezeh Omer Ani Mitzasiha, you would have thought that it's enough to see it first, that gives you ownership. Therefore, to dispel that, Tane Kula Shali Teberi'iyah Ba'amalo Kanile. So both say, so therefore, again, the Mishnah has to go ahead and add in the second phrase of the Kula Shali to teach you that what? Seeing it is not enough, but ultimately, again, only taking possession of it entitles you to some claim of ownership. Fine. So we'll say, so therefore we have results. So therefore our first question, right? Our first question above Metzia is why the need for both phrases? Why does it have to say Ani mitzasiha v'kula shali? To which again the simple answer is Ani mitzasiha by itself would have indicated or would have erroneously led you to think that seeing it gives you possession over it, because that's lashon mitzasa, at least colloquially, even though biblically mitzasiha also means physical possession. In order to dispel that mistaken notion, we added in this phrase of v'kula shali, it's all mine, to indicate that each party has actually taken physical possession of the item. Okay, beautiful. So the Gemara says, "Itana kula shali." So we'll say. So now, here's what's interesting. So of course that leads us to the next question, which is that what v'listni kula shali v'lo b'ani mitzasiya. So okay. So we'll say. So now you're telling me, ani mitzasiya by itself would have led me to the erroneous conclusion that seeing it first maybe entitles me to ownership. Therefore, I need the phrase v'kula shali. It's all mine to teach me that what that you have to take physical possession. So the Gemara says, okay, I have a better idea. What's my better idea? Leave out ani mitzasiha and just say kula shali. That's all. Let this be a case. Shnayim ochse b'talis. Reuven and Shimon are holding on to a talis. Reuven says kula shali. Shimon says kula shali. So let's leave out ani mitzasiha altogether and just say the phrase that, right, Reuven says it's all mine, Shimon says it's all mine. So which Gemara says, no. Itana kula shali, havamina ba'alma diktani mitzasiha, beri'ia ba'alma kani. So we'll say this is fascinating. We'll say, so the Gemara is afraid like this. We're nervous that if we would have just said kula shali, you still would have walking away with the mistaken notion that the word mitzasiha only means ri'iyah, seeing it, and again, technically speaking, you could acquire something with re'iyah. That's what you would have thought. That's what I would have thought. Therefore, again, Tana, ani mitzasiya, v'hadar Tana kula shali, dimimishna yisera ashmo'inim de re'iyah lokani. So I'll say, essentially, it's fascinating, right? So had you just said kula shali over here, had you said kula shali in this case, which, by the way, I just want to point out, it would have worked for our Mishnah. It really would have worked, right? In other words, you could have conveyed the point of the Mishnah over here. Shnein ochse betalis, Reuven is holding onto a cloak, and what happens? Reuven says kula shali, Shimon says kula shali, right? It's all mine. It's all mine. You could have absolutely made the point of the Mishnah. But what would we have been nervous about? That elsewhere in Shas, if you would have seen the phrase ani mitzasiha, we would have interpreted that to mean that what? Ani mitzasiha. Mitzasiha means what? I saw it, and that you could acquire something by seeing it. So Rabbi say the Mishnah goes out of its way to add in this additional phrase to dispel that mistaken notion. So there's a lot happening in this phrase. So therefore, the Mishnah phrases it as ani mitzasiha v'kula shali. What the Mishnah is saying is like this: ani mitzasiha could really mean that I saw it first. I saw it first, but seeing it is not enough to create ownership. Ultimately, again, you need kula shali as well. And I will say, now that I know that, if I ever see mitzasiya elsewhere in Shas, know that can't mean seeing it first, because again, you can never acquire anything ultimately by seeing it first. Incredible, I will say. So again, a lot of ink spilled. So in general, this is always a fascinating yisod, that a lot of ink spilled to tell me ultimately what the Mishnah means, right? The halacha that is being taught to us about what the halacha is and what the halacha is not. So what the halacha is that you could only acquire something through actually taking physical possession of it. What the halacha is not is mitzvah. You can't acquire something simply through seeing it. Incredible. But say, take a look. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Ba'alma diktani mitziyasa b'chol makom sheshaninu shamotzi mitzia kina hava min the mitzia kani le mishasriya. So we'll say elsewhere in Shas, when we use lashon mitzia, you might have thought that you could acquire a found object simply through seeing it. So the Gemara says, "Kanile mishasriya delo ashmoinon shum tana delo kanile ela bahagba lahachi ashmoinon hacha mimishni yisera." So the fact that our Mishnah goes out of its way to say ani mitzasiya v'kula shali indicates to us that seeing something never entitles you to ownership, only taking physical possession. Incredible. So we'll say. So now the Gemara says, "Umi matzis amrit chada katani." So the Gemara says, so now here's what's interesting. So now what we have over here is the Mishnah explaining to me why halacha l'maisa, I need both, I need mitzvah siyah and v'kula shali. So the Gemara's suggestion of both is that the way the Mishnah is structured, because remember again, let's go back. How does the Mishnah read? Ze omer ani mitzvah siyah, v'ze omer ani mitzvah siyah. Ze omer kula shali, v'ze omer kula shali. Now, the Gemara is presupposing that it's one comprehensive case, even though it is phrased in a broken up fashion. So the Gemara now challenges that assertion. The Gemara says, I don't understand. The Gemara says, Umi matzis amris, chada katani. Do you really think that you could read this Mishnah as one case? Vaha ze v'ze katani. Ze omer ani mitzvah siyah, v'ze omer ani mitzvah siyah. Ze omer kula shali, v'ze omer kula shali. So we'll say this is fascinating. The Gemara now explains that we'll say it really feels like the Mishnah has two cases. That's really what it feels like. It feels like what's case number one? Case number one is Ze omer ani mitzvah siyah, v'ze omer ani mitzvah siyah. So case number one is I found it. That's case number one. Case number two, Ze omer kula shali, v'ze omer kula shali. We'll say, because remember, if it was really one case, like we said this before, it was really one case, how should you phrase it? Put it all together. Ze omer ani mitzvah siyah v'kula shali, v'ze omer ani mitzvah siyah v'kula shali. Now, both say, now it's interesting because even though it's not written that way, in the first part of the Gemara, that's how the Gemara seems to be reading it. Now the Gemara is backing up and says, one second, maybe you can't read it that way because that's not how it's written. So what's going on over here? So we'll say this is fascinating. Amar Papa, that's the name of a person. Reisha b'Metzia, v'Seifa b'Mekach u'Memkar. Wow. Both say, okay, now we just took a dramatically amazing twist. The Gemara says, you're right. Two different cases, I would say. What are the two? The first case, the Reisha, is right. So in other words, the case of Ze omer ani mitzvah siyah, v'Ze omer ani mitzvah siyah. So we'll say, so that is a case ultimately again of a lost object. Reuben and Shimon are both finding a lost object at the same time, what we call a Metzia. They're finding something and they're both claiming it. The Seifa is Mekach u'Memkar. Second case, the Mishnah, right, Ze omer kula shali, v'Ze omer kula shali, is talking about a case of Mekach u'Memkar. Now, I take a quick look at Rashi. Mekach u'Memkar, kinisim yat ploni, v'davka Mekach u'Memkar hu darmini yachloku b'shvua, tika levemer shneim kanua u'l'shneim nisrat samochar. So listen to this. So I understand the case of Metzia, right? Reuben and Shimon are walking down the street. They both see a cloak at the same time. They run over to it and they both grab hold of it. Reuven says, I found it first. Shimon says, I found it first. What's the halach yachloku? What's the case of Mekach u'Memkar? Shabbos says, this is fascinating. The case of Mekach u'Memkar is Reuven and Shimon both walk over to a vendor at the same time. And what do? They both put their money down at the same time. The vendor gladly accepts the money from both of them, as we'll talk about in a little bit. And they both pick up the object at the same time. So Reuven says, Kula shali, I bought it. Shimon says, Kula shali, I bought it. Look at Rashi. Finish Rashi. So the Gemara says, "Dafka in the case of Mekach u'Memkar, darmini yachloku b'shvua tika lememer shtem kanu u'l'shtem nisrat samochar." So we'll say there is the possibility of simultaneity in the case of a purchase. Literally, again, we'll say both of them go ahead and put down their money for the object at the same exact time. U'l'shtem nisrat samochar bal ze omer ani yarakti. Okay, so we'll leave out the rest of Rashi. So we'll say again. So Rav Papa's coming along and saying that halacha l'maisa, two different cases, Reisha case Metzia, Seifa case Mekach u'Memkar. All right, so we'll say utzricha. Now I need both cases. Why do I need both cases? Amud Beis, we'll say Yankee Stamin, Amud Beis. Just want to point out, Zavi only was repeating that trope that was perpetuated by you. So yeah, here we go. Amud Beis. All right, I've earned the reputation. That's why I'll say so. Amud Beis. So we'll say, why do I need two cases? So we'll say, so now in this version over here, so remember again, so we'll say, so just keep, by the way, we'll say, is this not beautiful Gemara? That you can actually hold cup in every single stage of it? So we'll say, so now remember again, we're transitioning. In stage one of the Gemara, We're talking about one comprehensive case. Zemar Ani Metzia Kula Shali is one case of finding a lost object, and they're both claiming that, or a hefker object, we're both caught at the same time. Now, Bosai, new version. In this version of Rav Papa, first case of Ani Metzia is literally talking about Reuven and Shimon finding, we'll call it the hefker object or a lost object at the same time. The case of Zemar Kula Shali is a case of a sale. Both of them claiming they bought the same object at the same exact time. So the Gemara says, we need both cases. Why? Watch this. Ditana Metzia, had we just brought up a case ultimately of Metzia, of Reuven and Shimon finding an object at the same time, Havamina Metzia hu diramu Rabbanan Shvua alei. I would have said it's only in the case of a lost object where the rabbis imposed a shvua. Why? The Gemara says, "Mishum demori va'amar chavroi lav midi chaser ba ezel itfis v'ispalig badei." So say, let's take a step back for just a moment. What is the point of a shvua? Right? Let's just place in the Mishnah, right? So let's go through our Papa's idea over here. Right? Reuven and Shimon are both, they're holding a cloak, Shaimalchs and Metalis, that they found, right? Reuven's claiming it's all mine. Shimon's claiming it's all mine. So Chazal said, okay, both of you swear that you own no less than 50% and split it. What's the point of the shvua? We'll say the point of the shvua is a powerful mechanism that gets people to admit that they're lying. Because we'll say people don't want to take a shvua. In other words, I'll lie in general. We'll say it's life. People will lie if what? If they can get what they want and get away with it relatively easily. Like in other words, if kind of like we're all into like low impact sin, right? Low impact sin is good because once you get in, you get out. Like and again, no one gets hurt. No one gets hurt. So therefore, if Reuven and Shimon could claim, Reuven could claim. Let's say for argument's sake, Shimon was really the one who got it first. Reuven says, listen, let me chaperine over here, right? It's not like Shimon lost anything. We both found it at the same time. I'll claim, he'll get 50%, I'll get 50%, and again, it's a victimless crime because anyway, it's a found object. So the shvua is there. The shvua is there to prevent someone from lying. So I will say, so here's what's interesting. So when does shvua work? Shvua works like in a regular normative case. So here, we could assume that shvua will help, let's say again in this case, where let me flip it. Reuven found it first. Then Shimon sees, you know what? Let me chaperine over here, grab a hold of this talis, say that I found it as well, and we'll split it. We'll just split it. I am depriving Reuven of 50%. I'm not really depriving him of anything. Why? Because he just found this. This is found money. Found money. It's not like I'm not going into his wallet. I'm not going into his bank account. I'm not stealing something from his house. It's found. So okay, he still walks away 50% richer than he was 10 minutes ago, and I get 50% also. So in that case, Chazal said, let's slap a shvua on that. So now, shvua comes along. Now, Reuven is more than happy to deprive Shimon of 50% and gain 50% from himself. He does not take an oath. The moment he has to swear to it, he's like, you know what? No, thank you. So that's where Shavua helps to see if someone is lying, because if they are lying, they'll walk away before taking a shua. So that's the Gemara says. Ditana Metzia, had the Gemara just mentioned the case of Metzia, Havamina Metzia hu d'ram Rabbanan shvua alei. It's the case of Metzia where ultimately, again, the rabbis go ahead and impose the shvua. Why? Mishum demori va'amar chavroi lav midi chaser ba. Because again, Reuven could justify lying because he would say, you know what? I'm not depriving Shimon of anything. Ezel itfis ispalig ba'adei. Let me just grab onto the talis. I'll go ahead and get half. And we'll say, and no, right? There's no loss to anyone. That's where a shvua could help to be mavar. That's where a shvua could clarify if someone's telling the truth or not. Look at Rashi. Demora va'amar. Mora het liatzmo lechos babalo mishpat. Lav midi chaser. Eno mafsid klum bechina balo. V'af balo torech. Fine. So that's where shvua could help. Ava mekach umemkar deleka lememar hachi. So I will say, but in the case of Mekach Memkar, so I will say, the Gemara says, in the case of Mekach Memkar, it's really highly unlikely that both people own the object. Right? Highly unlikely. Rashi says over here that at the end of the day, we're concerned that a guy who is going to lie in a transaction, when I will say again, in a transaction you are causing someone to lose. So in a transaction where you're causing someone to lose, we are concerned that if you're willing to lie about Mekach Memkar, you're also willing to do what? You're willing to lie about Shvua. And if you're willing to lie about Shvua, then ultimately, again, the process of Shvua doesn't really help to bring out the truth. And had it just quoted the case of Mekach Umemkar, so the Gemara says, Hu diramu Rabbana shvu alei, mishum demori va'amri chavroi dami kayov, va'ana dami kayavina. The Gemara says, Hashta detzricha ledidi, ashka la'ana, v'chavrei lezo litrach v'leizben. So we'll say, so again, how we just brought down the case of Mekach Umemkar, the case of a transaction. So we'll say, so again, Reuven could have said like this, listen, I'm paying money and Shimon's paying money. I need this object now. Let my friend go ahead and he'll purchase the object somewhere else. He can be more heter, and therefore we'll say because of haras heter, the shvu will come along and help bring out the truth. Aval Metzia, but in Metzia, where you can't make this parallel claim, Emalo, perhaps ultimately the shul will not help, therefore tzricha. So therefore we'll say you need this. Therefore we'll say bottom line is, halacha l'mais according to Rav Papa, again let's come full circle, the case of Ze Omer Ani Mitzasiya, V'Ze Omer Ani Mitzasiya, that ultimately is talking about a case of a found object. Ze Omer Kula Shali, V'Ze Omer Kula Shali, that's talking about an actual transaction where both of them are claiming they bought the same object. And I will say the beauty of Rav Papa is that reads better into the Mishnah, right? Because halacha l'maisa now the Mishnah reads as two distinct cases and not as the same case. Okay, so we'll say let's go with this. Here we go. So Mekach Umemkar v'lechse zuzi miman nokit. So we'll say I don't understand. In the case of a transaction, Reuben's claiming I bought the object. Shimon's claiming I bought the object. So we'll say it's very simple. Let's go over to the vendor and say to the vendor, who did you get money from? Who did you get? Who paid you for the object? To which the Gemara says, "Lo tzricha denakit mitarvayu mechad midaite umechad bal karcha v'lo yedana mihu midaite umihu bal karche." So we'll say, here's what happened: both Reuven and Shimon gave money to the vendor. From one of them, the vendor accepted the money willfully. The other one kind of foisted his money upon the vendor. What's the problem? The vendor doesn't remember who is who. And obviously, Reuven's claiming, I'm the one from whom you accepted it willingly. Shimon's claiming, I'm the one from whom you accepted it willingly. Okay, so I'll say, so that is the case, that is the Mishnah according to Rav Papa. So I'll say, so here is our fundamental machlokes, how to read the Mishnah. Is the Mishnah one comprehensive case of Reuven and Shimon finding a lost object? Ze omer ani mitzasiya v'kula shali, ze omer ani mitzasiya v'kula shali, or no, Rav Papa, it's two cases. Ze omer ani mitzasiya, Reuven and Shimon both found an object together, and V'zemer Kula Shali, they both bought an object and both are claiming they're the owner of the object. Okay, so we'll say our Mishnah does not reflect the view of Benanas. What does Benanas say? Ti Benanas Omar, Keitzad Elu V'Elu Ba'in Lidei Shvu Hashav. So we'll say, here's the problem, that our Mishnah cannot reflect the view of Benanas. Why? Because we'll say Benanas says you can never have a case where halacha l'maisa someone's swearing falsely. In other words, halacha, according to Benanas, halacha doesn't structure a case where someone is automatically swearing falsely. So we'll say, Sigmar's Havmin over here is that in our Mishnah, someone is swearing falsely. In other words, Reuven and Shimon are not both the owners. So someone's swearing falsely. To which the Gemara says, Afilu te'em benanas. Hasam vada ikashu hashav. So I will say, take a quick look at Rashi. Rashi says, the loke benanas. Rashi says over here, B'mesechah shvuos kavi chen b'ni alpin kaso, elu v'elu ba'in lebezin, almanas li shava echamem l'shav. So when it's Amar Balabayis the chen b'ni. So we'll say, the case that Benanas is doing is, Benanas is like this. Imagine for a moment you have an employer who pays his employees, but the way he does it is he gives them store credit. So he says to the chen b'ni, he says to the shopkeeper, my employees are going to show up and let them buy whatever they need to buy in accordance with the amount of money. He gives a budget. So what happens? I will say in this case over here, so Rashi says, Tein libni chitim bedinar, va'ali l'shalim ola. Polim b'sela mo shani chayiv b'scharam, va'ali l'teisela, hu omer nesatia, v'hu omer lo natalti. So we'll say in this case over here, the shopkeeper says, I paid your workers, but the employee says, I never received anything. So we'll say, so what's talacha? So the Gemara says, Shnehem tovin es balabai. So we'll say the halacha is in this case, the chenvini swears that he paid the employee, and the employee swears that he did not take anything, and both of them are able to collect from the balabayis. But we'll say Benanas says in that case, no way, that can't be the halacha. Why? Because that means someone's swearing falsely. But we'll say both of those things can't be true. It can't be that the chenveni, that the shopkeeper didn't give out the goods and that the employee didn't receive the goods. That's not possible. It's not possible. In other words, we'll say, I'm sorry, just the opposite, right? It can't be that the chenveni did pay the goods and and that the employee didn't take it. Somebody's lying. So Banana says you can't structure a case. You can't impose a shvuah in a situation where it's going to result in someone lying. So obviously our Mishnah doesn't reflect the view of Bananas. Why? Because in our Mishnah someone's also going to be lying. To which the Gemara says, no. Here's the difference. The Gemara says, in the case of the chenveni, of the employer, who goes ahead and tells the shopkeeper, give $500 of goods to my employee, and now the chenveni claims he dispensed the goods, and the employee claims he got nothing. We'll say in that case, someone is absolutely lying. So the Gemara says, We'll say in this case over the Mishnah, somebody doesn't have to be lying. Why not? So the Gemara says, remember again, in this case, you can impose a shvuah both on Reuven and Shimon. Why? Rabbi say it is possible that one of them is not lying. Right? That neither of them are lying. Why? How are neither of them lying? Rabbi say, hi. How? Because at the end of the day, they're both picking up the object at the same time. We said this before. I kind of gave this a little bit in the Mishnah. And I will say again, halacha l'maisa, they could actually have both picked up the object at the same time, and therefore both are making a legitimate claim. Therefore, even according to Bananas, you could go and impose a shvuah on both of them, because halacha l'maisa, neither is lying. Okay, so it could be like sumchus. It could be like Bananas. Our Mishnah doesn't reflect the view of sumchus. Why not? What does sumchus say? So the Gemara says, ha'amar, mamon hamotel b'safek cholkin b'lo shua. I will say, how beautiful is this? We did this in Baba Kama. Remember we had this big machlokes, we had sumchus, we spent days on sumchus. Mamon hamotel b'safek cholkin below shvuah. Whenever you have a machlokes on ownership money, we'll say, what do? You split it without a shvuah. So we'll say, this was the case ultimately of the goring. Remember again, so Reuven's ox gores Shimon's pregnant cow, and halacha l'maisa we find the fetus by the side of the cow. We don't know again, did the cow birth the fetus before the goring or after the goring? So Sumcha says, Maman hamotel b'safek yachlok. You split it, but without a shvuah. So obviously our Mishnah doesn't reflect the view of Sumcha. Why not? Because our Mishnah says you split it, but with what? With a shvuah. To which the Gemara says, ve'ela mai rabbanon. So rather it has to be again, our Mishnah must reflect the view of the rabbanon. Ha'amri hamotzi mechavera alav haraya. But the Rabbanan say that in general, the halacha is if you want to go ahead and extract money from your fellow, so ultimately the burden of proof is upon the raya, is upon the extractor. So the Gemara says, "Hi mai." So we'll say, what do we do with this in this case? Here we go. I amrit b'shlama Rabbanan hasam delot hafsi tarvayhu. Amru Rabbanan hamotzi mechaber alav haraya. Hacha de tarvayu tafsi palgila b'shvua. So remember again. So in general, the Rabbanan say hamotzi mechaver lavaraya. Right? If you want to extract, Rabbanan say, what's the beauty in this case? The beauty in this case over here is that halacha l'maisa, both parties are holding onto the object. So because both parties are holding onto the object, therefore halacha l'maisa yachloku, we split it with a shvua. Works out beautifully. El'i amrit sumchos. Rabbanan say if you want to make our Mishnah like sumchos, hashta umah hasam delo tafsi tarvay chokim below shvua. So we'll say in the case of the goring that I just mentioned very quickly, where neither party is, so to speak, muchsak, neither party is holding on, yet we split the contested money without shvua. Hachar de tarvayu tafsi lo. The Gemara says hachi the tarvayu tafsi lo kol shekain. So we'll say certainly in this case over here, where halacha l'maisa both parties are holding on to it, certainly we should split it, but we should be able to split it according to sumchos, even without a shvua. To which the Gemara says, "Afilu tema sumchos, kemer sumchos, shema v'shema." But say, when does sumchos say that if you have mamon hamotel b'safek cholkin below shvua? When is that? To say when ultimately again shema v'shema, neither party has a definitive claim. Aval bari ubari lo amar. Rabbi say in a case of bari ubari, where both parties are making a definitive claim, maybe even sumchos would say you split it, but you split it with a shvua. So we'll say what we'll do is we'll stop who we refer today. So we'll say, so bottom line, we accomplished a lot today, but just understand where we're ending off. We're ending off over here in this sugya, in this piece of whose idea, whose concept is reflected in the Mishnah itself. So we have three different streams of thought. It's clearly not going to be Ben Nanas, right? Or I should say, it could be Ben Nanas, because Ben Nanas says, again, we don't want a Shavua Shav, but this could be a case where it's not a Shavua Shav. But let's say, and now we're just trying to figure out, is it Sumchos, is it Rabbanon? Sumchos says, Mamna Moto B'Safek, Cholkin below Shavua. The Rabbanon say, Motzi Mechai Be'er Lava Raya. So now we're just trying to figure out authorship. And Meretz Hashem will say to be resolved tomorrow. What a tremendous zuchos to be able to begin this magnificent Masechta together. But we'll say we began it together, but halabai we should be zocheh Meretz Hashem to be Messiahim it together, but not here. We should be zocheh Meretz Hashem to make this siyum and all of our further siyumim. And Meretz Hashem and a rebuild to Yerushalayim here, Rabbi Amenu, Amen. A good night of Shabbos and a shkoyach. Shabbos. Good Shabbos. All right, Chavra on Zoom. Good Shabbos, everyone.